Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another poetry discussion. A poetry discussion which is from Emily Dickinson, and in as much it will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one, obviously the poetry discussion playlist, now over 200 videos strong. And number two, the Emily Dickinson playlist, which is now over 50 videos strong. So real quick, before we get into it, if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel. There's poetry every Monday at least, as well as short story discussions, as well as novel read-alongs, things like that. Right now we are going through No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. So that is what we do on this channel, and if you want to help me out with what I am doing on this channel, hitting the like button tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. Now, let's get into it, because the poem that we are talking about today is one that is not one of the better known Emily Dickinson poems, but I think it should be plastered on the wall in every library across the country, probably every hallway of every school across the country. There is no frigate like a book. It reads as such. There is no frigate like a book to take us lands away, nor any coursers. Oh, give me 1 second, I lost myself. There is no frigate like a book to take us lands away, nor any coursers like a page of prancing poetry. This traverse may the poorest take without a press of toll. How frugal is the chariot that bears a human soul. So this is the poem in its entirety. It is a short poem. I think Emily Dickinson is probably at her best with the short poems, but the narrative poems that she puts out like she's about to drop a new album. But the narrative poems that we have from Emily Dickinson can take us on more, like the frigate of an entire book. An Emily Dickinson poem is extraordinary for the places that it takes us. But literature, as this poem points out so spectacularly, can take us anywhere. In fact, it can take us everywhere. And the only real toll that we endure, as is pointed out here, is the mental toll, not the physical toll. And there is conjecture as to Emily Dickinson's health. There are, all sorts of people who say this is what Emily Dickinson struggled with, and here's why, and this is what Emily Dickinson struggled and why. And I'm not here to make any of those arguments, but if there was indeed something physical, even if there was something psychological that forced Emily Dickinson into the sphere that Emily Dickinson inhabited for her entire life, and golly, how impressive it was that she saw so far out of that life from that life. This poem exemplifies that. But the real discussion that I want to get into here is the discussion that Emily Dickinson herself sets up. It's not maybe a journey of what I want to talk about here with this poem is maybe not a journey of the spiritual variety, but just the wonderment that is the thing that literature allows. I think it's undersold in today's world, the technological breakthrough that was represented by the printing press. Johannes Gutenberg, 1432, I believe, the printing press. 1430 something, the printing press was invented. And what this did was it greatly enhanced the rate at which books could be made. There was no internet back then, and You know as well as I do that the human mind is more often flawed than not. So if you were getting information directly from a person who had not verified or had not verified this information in quite some time, that information was likely to be corrupted. Maybe not through malice, simply through the wares of time. The advent of the printing press was something that opened up human knowledge in a way comparable to the advent of the internet. It is difficult to say on the same scale simply because of how immediate the internet is and how so you don't have to have the specific internet to reference literature versus the specific internet to reference science. So in that way, it is quite a bit more operable, perhaps, than books. But this initial run of the printing press would have exploded knowledge. Now, at the time, it was exploding the holy word of Christ. The first printing presses were used. You can, I mean, what are they called? Gutenberg Bibles. The first thing that they were doing with printing presses was printing copies of the Bible to make that more accessible, but not too accessible. You still wanted to have your ring of power that were the ones who wielded the holy book, right? But this was the first step towards democratization of knowledge. And though it was the 1430s where the printing press, from which the printing press rose, it would not be until the 1700s that printing presses became sort of ubiquitous, right? The 1700s. And here we have Emily Dickinson, born in the 1830s, 400 years after the printing press. But to any modicum of what it means for printing to be common, printing was new still. The printing press was still fairly new. It would not have been, and obviously it would have evolved in this time. You're not talking the same printing presses by which Johannes Gutenberg rose to fame and fortune. In fact, I'm only assuming that he rose to fortune from that, but so often in that time, if you created too big a wave, you were done away with. But we have in the world of Emily Dickinson the idea of books still representing something that was maybe not holy, but certainly sacred. Maybe not limited, but maybe not rare, but definitely limited. Are there, in the same way that we have, I mean, surely you all have a favorite quote or poem about the wonder that is literature, right? There are so many of them. And probably there is one plastered on the wall at your local library. It might not be this one, but it will be something. Are there, in that same way, poems and quotes, and not just quotes, but profound quotes, quotes of profundity? Are there quotes in that way about the internet? I think it's ironic in that way because in the form of books, whether you're writing about the skeletal system or the process of cannery, right? Or how to find gold, prospecting, no matter what it is that you're writing about, it's going to fall on deaf ears, if you will, if you are not writing with some type of enjoyable prose. We all remember reading the geology book that we had to read in either high school or college and how awful that was. If, instead of a book, You had a series of videos to watch in your geology class, like the lectures, but better. How much more enjoyable would that have been? So the proliferation of knowledge that is allowed by the internet, by computers in general, is much more varied than the type of knowledge which is funneled through literature. So the idea of this greatness, this proliferation of knowledge, is not forced through, is not constrained, funneled through the piping of a writer in the same way that it is with books. The greatness of books is all funneled through an author. But on the internet, you have people making videos, you have people making music, you have all of these different things versus someone who has to write that thing down. Maybe this isn't the most profound poetry discussion for Emily Dickinson, but I think that on the level of understanding what the thing is which we are here to love, it is. In the question of loving literature, this thing, this idea that the love of knowledge through the internet does not require the same narrowing of a nozzle through an author should sort of upset us. Those of us who are here loving literature. And if you're here 12 minutes into a video on a random Emily Dickinson poem, obviously you are a literature lover to some degree. So what will the internet age mean for literature? Well, so far, the returns are diminishing. The early 1900s, the 19-teens, the 1920s, into the 1930s, we probably had the greatest era of American letters. Hemingway, I'm blanking on names now. Faulkner, all of these, the expatriates, all of these American authors just before the Second World War, probably contributing the greatest era of American letters. I think there will always be champions of the authorial voice. There will always be champions of literature. There will always be people to claim that throne. But just like in boxing, right? You had in the 1960s, the 1970s, oh man, Muhammad Ali and George Frazier and all of the heavyweights. That was what it was to be a large athlete and in your prime. You were a boxer. By the 1990s, you had Mike Tyson, who might be the scariest heavyweight of all time. Scariest, not best, not greatest, scariest heavyweight of all time. But his reign is in question because he did not go against all of the greats. There was no, if he was the Muhammad Ali of his era, he had no Joe Frazier of his era until the sort of the end of his time, right? So Lennox Lewis and things like that. These were big guys who could punch, who had a lot of tools. But today, if you're looking around, I mean, I think there is an argument to be made for George Saunders. I do believe, I 100% believe that Bret Easton Ellis would be the greatest novelist of our era, would be the novelist of our time if he dedicated himself to writing frickin' novels as opposed to dallying in Hollywood. Bret, get your head out of your butt. Please, American Letters is searching for you. But because there is not the rivalry. So in the 30s, um, all of those authors, those big authors, there is a legendary rivalry, for example, between Hemingway and Faulkner. They would write each other letters, and there was so much snark in them that there's books about it. And poor F. Scott Fitzgerald, right? But so there's a quote, to go back to the boxing reference. And you don't have to, like, I hope I'm not making a video that you have to be a boxing aficionado to understand. I don't think I am. But you understand the argument. There was I can't remember who it was. One of the great boxing writers was asked about the downfall of boxing. Why don't we have great heavyweights anymore? Why don't we have these fighters anymore? What has happened to this sport? And he said, well, the greatest heavyweight of our era is playing middle linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens and wears number 52, Ray Lewis. He had the intensity, he had the size, he had the wherewithal, he had the mindset to be a boxer. But boxing was not the popular thing. Football was. So Ray Lewis was a football player and not a boxer. That, I think, is happening to writing. Bret Easton Ellis, the example I just gave, would be the greatest novelist of our day. Instead, he likes to dilly-dally in Hollywood because movies are much sexier than are novels. That is the unfortunate state of our world. How many of your favorite YouTubers, the PewDiePies of the world, and I don't know, honestly, and I'm not trying to talk down on, I've never watched a PewDiePie video. I don't know what he does. I assume he must be a very entertaining person. He must have a very entertaining personality, or he would not have the following that he does. Would that guy, were his predilections aimed differently, be a novelist and have his following through that route? Shane Dawson, the same question. All of these different big-time YouTubers, would they be novelists if the age were different, if the internet were not used as opposed to books? Is today there no frigate like a YouTube channel? That is all that I have for this video. If you enjoy what you see here, if you want to help me out on this channel, hitting the like button tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos per week, and I hope to have you back for the next one. So consider hitting that subscribe button.